Behind me is the Strait of Hormuz, the most important 21 miles on Earth. It's the pinnacle of Gulf state cooperation, and every day 20% of the world's oil flows through here like clockwork. It's an absolute miracle of modern logistics. Honestly, this system is so robust, so precisely balanced, it's almost perfect. Even a temporary interruption of the Strait's normal operations can have lasting implications on many areas of the global economy. And to fully understand this, we have to look past the geopolitical theatre and look at the cold, hard math of scale. The Strait is 21 miles wide, but the deep water shipping lanes are just 2 miles wide. Through this geopolitical bottleneck flows 20 million barrels of oil every single day. To put that into perspective, that's roughly enough oil to fill the Empire State Building to the brim 3 times over, every 24 hours. But it's not just oil. Nearly 20% of the global liquefied natural gas, or LNG, passes through these exact same waters, driven mostly by Qatar. If these LNG ships stop, nations relying on natural gas for immediate power generation go dark. When you lose Hormuz, you aren't just losing a transit route, you're amputating the baseload off the global energy grid. So who takes the hit? If you live in the US or Europe, it's easy to think this is a Middle East problem. But the math of global demand says otherwise. Roughly 80% of the crude leaving Hormuz is destined for Asia, specifically China, India, Japan and South Korea. If this bridge breaks, Asia's massive manufacturing hubs face an immediate and existential supply crisis. But simply sourcing crude oil from other parts of the globe has issues that make it complicated. And that comes down to the chemistry of refining. You can't just replace Middle Eastern oil with American or Norwegian oil overnight. Crude oil is measured by its API gravity and sulfur content. Asian refineries are chemically tuned and physically constructed to process the heavy sour crude that comes out of the Gulf. Switching to the light sweet crude pumped from Texas requires massive time-consuming hardware retrofits. You can't just re-engineer a multi-billion-dollar refinery in a week. This is a severe chemical bottleneck stacked on top of a geopolitical one. Whenever trouble brews in the Gulf, pundits immediately point to the pipelines. Specifically, Saudi Arabia's east-west pipeline to the Red Sea and the UAE's pipeline to the Gulf of Oman. As we've already discussed, the normal flow through the Strait is 20 million barrels a day. The absolute theoretical maximum capacity of the bypass pipelines is roughly 9 million barrels a day. Even operating flawlessly, the world is instantly slammed for an unbridgeable deficit of over 11 million barrels a day. But what about our emergency savings, the Strategic Petroleum Reserves? The global SPR network holds roughly 1.5 billion barrels, and math tells us that if we're losing 11 million barrels a day from Hormuz, we're draining the entire global safety net in about 130 days. But physically, you can't pump it out that fast. These reserves are heavily stored in giant underground salt caverns. As you pump oil out, the internal pressure drops, meaning the extraction rate exponentially decreases over time. The pipes literally won't allow a fast rescue. The market panics long before the tanks actually run dry. Before we even get to the oil price, there's a financial bottleneck that hits instantly: the cost of risk. Even if the Strait isn't completely blocked by military action, the sheer threat of a rocket attack or mine strike destroys the actuarial math for global shipping. Every single tanker moving through these waters carries war risk insurance, and in peacetime, that premium is a tiny fraction of a percent of the hull's value. But after an explosion, that premium can instantly jump to 5% or more. So for a $200 million supertanker like this one, that means the cost of a single voyage spikes by $10 million overnight. Very quickly, ship owners refuse to sail, crews refuse to board, and the floating pipeline simply halts. You don't need to put a physical wall to block the Strait, you just need to make the insurance risk uninsurable. This brings us to the most terrifying math of all, the price spike. So why does an 11% drop in global supply cause prices to triple? Well, it comes down to a fundamental economic principle called the price elasticity of demand. Oil is highly inelastic. You still need to drive to work, and logistics companies still need to move goods, products, food, regardless of what the barrel costs. Now, the formula is really quite straightforward. We just need to rearrange the formula to solve for price and factor in the shift in quantity demand. Historically, the elasticity coefficient for the oil market has hovered near negative 0.05. Consequently, when the numbers are crunched, the results are really quite staggering. An 11% drop in global supply mathematically requires a massive 220% increase in the price to balance the equation. In a crisis, algorithmic trading and panic buying by nations hoarding fuel act as aggressive multipliers. This leads to a brutal economic concept called demand destruction. The price doesn't just go up, it weaponizes, skyrocketing until it literally bankrupts poorer nations and forces them to stop buying energy entirely. And these are exactly the triggers that cause oil prices to soar from $80 to $250 in a matter of days. But the math spills over way past the gas pumps. When you refine sour crude oil, a major byproduct is sulfur. The Gulf region exports about 24% of the world's traded sulfur. Why do we care? Because you need sulfur to manufacture sulfuric acid, which is the foundation chemical required to make phosphate fertilizers. No oil means no fertilizer, which triggers plunging global crop yields and skyrocketing food prices. What's more, sulfuric acid is heavily used in a process called copper leaching. If you want copper for electric vehicles, wind turbines and grid expansion, you need sulfur. The great irony of a fossil fuel shock in Hormuz is that it completely paralyzes the supply chains of the green energy transition. We are still entirely dependent on the byproducts of the very system we are trying to replace. In the end, every single one of these bottlenecks trickles directly down to you, the end consumer. And this disruption doesn't even need to last that long. Even a temporary closure creates a massive logistical lag. You can't just flip a switch and turn oil and gas terminals back on. Ships are widely out of position, refineries have gone offline, and clearing that backlog takes months. Long after the waters are safe and the straits reopen, that delayed price shock will still be hammering the markets. Historically, every sustained $10 increase in the price of a barrel of oil acts as a $70 billion tax on the global economy, adding up to 0.2% to global headline inflation. Central banks are forced into an impossible corner, raising interest rates to fight energy-driven inflation, which actively crushes their own economies into a stagflation spiral. We have engineered a brilliantly efficient $100 trillion global economy, but we've built it on a just-in-time energy fuse that's exactly 21 miles long. Thanks for watching, and if you like this kind of content and want to see some more, make sure you like and subscribe.